Kentucky basketball has been hitting the recruiting trail pretty hard as of late, and it's looking like the Wildcats are starting to gain favor with a couple of high-profile five-star prospects.
You are Locked On Kentucky, your daily podcast on the Kentucky Wildcats, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
All right, what's going on, Big Blue Nation? Welcome on into Locked On Kentucky, your daily Kentucky Wildcats podcast. I'm your host, Lance Dawe, and on today's episode of Locked On Kentucky, we are going to be discussing two high-profile prospects that the Wildcats have now contacted and re-offered. Two of the best players in the 2025 recruiting cycle, AJ Dybantsa and Jasper Johnson. Going to be discussing those two players today, specifically AJ, who is the number one player in the 2025 class. Thank you so much for making Locked On Kentucky your first listen every single day. Want to remind everyone out there that we are free and available on all platforms. If you are watching on YouTube, I would greatly appreciate it if you subscribed to the show. And if you are listening on podcast, I would also appreciate it if you subscribed there as well. All right, so let's go ahead and get into it. Two players that the Kentucky Wildcats have taken a look at, and one of them they have re-offered. We'll start here with the number one player in the 2025 class, AJ Dybantsa. He is phenomenal. Just go and watch this kid's highlight reel. I cannot show it on the show, but I would strongly encourage you, go watch this kid play. Go watch how he's performed over a couple of different prep circuits. Go watch how he's performed for his high school. This kid is insane. Out of Napa, California, prolific prep high school, the number one player across the board, a perfect five-star rating, a 1.005-star rating. He is literally as high as you can possibly rank him in both 24/7 Sports, their individual player rating system, as well as their composite rankings as well. 6'9", 200 pounds small forward with just beautiful touch on the offensive end of the floor. I think the big thing that stands out to me about Dybantsa in his frame is just how long his wingspan is. It really does allow him to create so many different things that maybe a player at his height and weight would not normally be able to do, as far as wrap around different players for incredible layups around the rim, whether it be for different pull-ups just to give himself a little bit more of separation when it comes to hitting those jumpers. It is truly impressive what he is able to do just based off of his physical traits alone. And then you really like the aggression that he also shows on offense in a multitude of ways. It's really, really, really pretty basketball to watch if you just go and watch him play individually. The mid-range and at the rim is where he absolutely thrives. Just again, beautiful touch when handling the basketball, incredible touch around the rim when it comes to either finishing through contact or just wrapping around and finishing with incredible, again, just feathery touch when it comes to just being like pacing himself. We've talked about this recently on the show about how touch with the basketball and pacing and just fluidity is just a massive thing when it comes to watching some of these prospects. And I believe on the most recent episode of Locked On Kentucky, we talked about Jamie Vinson, and then we talked about a five-star prospect. Vinson, I think, has a ways to go when it comes to fluidity and when it comes to, just comfortableness at his position. And then you've got a five-star prospects like this who really do show why they are rated and ranked so highly across different websites and different recruiting rankings. It's because of things like this, just their natural ability on both sides of the ball, but especially on offense. They just look so much more comfortable with the ball in their hands. And Dybantsa, again, at the rim, in the mid-range, hitting these really impressive fadeaways, just able to create so much separation with just this lofty ability to just kind of get up in the air and just kind of float. It's really, really, really smooth basketball that AJ Dybantsa is playing, again, for prolific prep and for a couple of different circuits. I believe, and I have this pulled up here, during his sophomore season, this is not his junior season, his sophomore season, he played for England Preparatory High School, and he carried them to a 26-2 record, averaged 19.1 points, 9.6 rebounds, 2.9 assists, and 2.5 blocks per game, while shooting almost 61% from the field and 41% on three-point attempts. Incredible efficiency from Dybantsa. And again, a lot of it, I think, has to do with his frame. He's just a lankier, taller, longer wingspan type of player that can do different things that normally small forwards can't do, as far as reaching around, reaching over, reaching through some different players sometimes. I am very impressed, not just with the layup package and with the mid-range, but just how aggressive this kid is taking the ball to the rim. He just sort of glides past people, and he is not afraid to dunk on anybody's head. Through his highlight package, he has some incredible dunks through contact, where he is just absorbing it and throwing it down in somebody's face. And again, a lot of it has to do with he's just got longer arms than you. He can kind of jump lofty. It's so weightless is what I keep saying. It's lofty, it's weightless, it's feathery, it's just smooth. It looks like easy basketball for AJ. It's just incredible, an incredible prospect, arguably the best we've discussed on this show. And Kentucky basketball has re-offered him. According to Jack Pilgrim of KSR, the number one consensus high school recruit in high school basketball, he has been re-offered by the Kentucky Wildcats. He talked about Mark Pope during the EYBL Session 3 in Indianapolis just a couple of days ago. And Mark Pope has made it very clear that he is interested. Dybantsa said, quote, "Mark Pope is here. He told me he'd be here. He called my dad. I hopped on the phone with them and we had a little chat. When we hopped on the call, I received the offer. I had Calipari first, and now I've been re-offered by Pope. He's talking to me about what's going to be happening, keeping it the same Kentucky as a top team, and he says he thinks I'm a good fit." And then he was asked about, kind of what different conversations look like as it ramps up into the summer. Dybantsa said it's going well, just about his general recruitment. "After this session, I'm going to get some more calls, I hope," and he laughed about it. He said that he's not really, and this is similar to other Kentucky recruits in the past, he's not really going to start to ramp things up until after Peach Jam, which we'll just have to wait and see kind of what happens from that. But during his junior season, during the circuit that he's been playing on, 23.6 points per game, 4.5 rebounds, 2 assists per contest, shooting 58.3% from the field, and 37.5% from three. Again, insanely efficient numbers for a kid that plays small forward at 6'9". He said about his recruitment, he said, "My dad handles my recruitment, but I've got Duke, Arkansas, and USC from the new staff, and I'm sure I'm hearing from other schools too. I'm open to every school. I'll probably narrow it down right after Peach Jam, and then I'll take my visits." He's talked a lot about Duke recently, and honestly, that's probably going to be the big school at the end of the day to look out for here. But the fact that Kentucky has been able to reach out, make that connection again, if the Wildcats were able to land somebody like Dybantsa, and he was able to perform at that small forward position for the Wildcats next season, he would be just incredible. I think he could play power forward, absolutely. Obviously, with kind of the space, pace, three-point shooting that Mark Pope wants to run with, I think he would be just ferocious. He would be terrifying in the open court when it came to what Kentucky wanted to do in the transition game. Statistically, I think he would be a nightmare for opponents, regardless of where he goes, but especially in a system that kind of wants to push that pace. I think his handle, as far as ball handling skills, I think it could be a little tighter. If we're going to talk about things that, could be critiqued, I think he could absolutely gain a little bit more strength, but it's not needed. And then on top of this, I also think that the speed of the college game may be something that affects him to a degree. But again, I think he would thrive in an up-tempo system. I don't really think it would knock him a ton, just kind of building with the speed of the collegiate game itself. I think that could be an issue, but as his reels suggest, it's not going to be a big problem, him taking that next step to the college game. So AJ Dybantsa, a massive, massive prospect that the Kentucky Wildcats have now officially re-offered underneath Mark Pope. This would be probably the best player that I've seen come to Kentucky over the past 3, 4, 5 years. Just as far as raw talent goes, it would be really, really hard for this guy to screw up making it to the NBA and being a potential number 1 overall pick. Just probably the best. It's the most put together. It's the best put together game of any high school player I have seen, as far as just doing a little bit of scouting, doing a little bit of watching these guys, their different highlight reels. This is the most complete player I have seen coming out of high school yet. Better than Cooper Flagg, in my opinion, and better than any Kentucky prospect that we've seen run through here. And we've seen some really good scores come through over the past couple of seasons. So let me know what you think about AJ. Let me know what you think about the Wildcats and their recruitment with them. Let's go to an in-state product. Let's talk about Jasper Johnson, a player that looks like, he is going to at least be considering the Kentucky Wildcats now that Mark Pope is here alongside, obviously, Coach Cal in Arkansas and a number of other places. Let's talk about his recruitment in just a second. Before I do that, though, I want to tell you guys about our friends over at LinkedIn Jobs. When you are hiring for your small business, you want to find quality professionals that are right for the role. And that's why you have to check out LinkedIn Jobs, because they have the tools to help find the right professionals for your team faster and for free. It is not just another job board. They help you hire professionals you cannot find anywhere else, even those who aren't actively searching for a new job but might be open to the perfect role. In a given month, over 70% of LinkedIn users don't visit other leading job sites. So if you're not looking on LinkedIn, you are simply looking in the wrong place. On LinkedIn, 86% of small businesses get a qualified candidate within 24 hours. Hire professionals like a professional over on LinkedIn. You can post your job for free at linkedin.com/lockedoncollege. That is linkedin.com/lockedoncollege to post your job for free. Terms and conditions apply. All right, continuing along here on the Tuesday edition of Locked On Kentucky, Lance Dawe hanging out here with you. AJ Dybantsa is just an incredible prospect. I think somebody that Kentucky should continue to pursue heavily over the next few months. Obviously, Peach Jam is going to affect things. Super excited about this prospect and the fact that Kentucky has reached out to them. Again, let me know what you think in the comments below. If you have any questions for the show, by the way, you can leave them here in the YouTube comments. If you're listening on podcast, at Locked On UK on Twitter is where you can find me. You can tag me in a tweet, ask me a question, and I'll do my best to answer it here on the show. Also, if you have not joined the Locked On Kentucky Discord, it's a place to just go and chat. It's free. It's just a place for all of us here to kind of talk about Big Blue Nation, things that are going on with basketball, football, baseball, anything Kentucky athletics related. I would appreciate it if you wanted to go to Lance Dawe _ over on Twitter, Lance Dawe _ on Twitter. There's a link at the top of my page where you can join that Discord. Again, just a place to go chat and hang out. All right, really excited about AJ, but I'm also really excited about another very high-profile player. Branson, Missouri is where he's originally from, plays in Link Academy High School, a player close to UK. Jasper Johnson, a 6'4", 170-pound, 5-star combo guard, the number 11 player nationally, number 3 combo guard, number 1 player in the state of Missouri. Obviously, Kentucky is taking an interest here. He is a top priority for Mark Pope and the Kentucky Wildcats. Again, KSR had a pretty solid read on just where this kid is at. Asked him a couple different questions, got some quotes. I would highly encourage you guys to go check out KSR if you want to read any of these recruiting updates. I'm not giving you anything special here. I am absorbing the information just as you are, and we're just discussing our opinions about how we feel about these different players. But Jasper, according to KSR, is a top priority for Mark Pope and the Kentucky Wildcats. Direct quote from Jasper here. Pope said he might not recruit as many freshmen as Cal, but he wants me to be one of those freshmen that come in and makes an impact from day one. And I truly do believe that Johnson could be somebody that works very well with what Mark Pope wants to do. Johnson would probably end up playing shooting guard just based on what I've seen from his highlight reels. He'd end up playing shooting guard because this kid right now does specifically one thing very, very, very well, and that's score. And whenever he gets hot, he gets really, really hot, and he's hard to stop at that shooting guard spot. Adam Finkelstein, director of scouting over at 24/7 Sports, says Jasper Johnson is a scoring guard who has spurts of extreme tough shot making. When he gets hot, he has a super soft, natural touch and is very crafty around the lane with a deep bag of runners, floaters, and other types of finishes. In addition to the jumpers and step backs he's capable of making from the perimeter. This is very similar to AJ as we're talking about. Again, these kids at the top of these recruiting rankings, there's a reason they stand out. They are just simply more put together than some of these lower-ranked prospects. Now, that does not mean these lower-ranked prospects cannot pan out and develop, because some of them absolutely can, and some of them do end up exceeding some of these five-star talents as far as just raw ability goes by the end of their collegiate careers. But Johnson, as a high schooler, clearly shows the versatility and the fluidity that a player like AJ does when it comes to scoring the basketball specifically. Again, floaters, runners, crafty finishes at the rim. At 6'4", 170 pounds, it's a little bit more standard. It's a little bit more what you expect. Dybantsa, obviously a shocker when it comes to the way that he's able to finish at 6'9", 200 pounds. Johnson, a little bit more traditional in the sense, I should say, even though it still is very impressive the way that he's able to score the ball. Also, not afraid to dunk in somebody's face, and he's got the ability to do that. Physically, according to Finkelstein, Johnson is lean, but he's very long with a recorded +5 wingspan. Similar to Dybantsa, just a very lengthy player. In addition to building up his body, he also needs to learn to impact the game more than when the ball isn't in his hands, or more specifically, when he's not on one of his scoring sprees. That's what Finkelstein had to say about Johnson. I think that that's true, but I also wonder, in a Mark Pope system, how much would Johnson have to do based on the way that Pope has run things in the past? Sure, you can have a point guard or a shooting guard that does a bunch of different little things really well, right? But you can also have scorers up and down the roster and people that can pass the rock even down into the front court. Khalifa from last year is a very good example of this. You've got players in your front court that shoot threes. Noah Waterman is another good example. Shoot threes, pass the rock, do all of these different things that maybe guards would typically do. It's positionless to an extent, despite the player's physical tools representing those individual positions, right? So like your point guards still look like point guards, your centers still look like centers. Players like Jasper come along sometimes in the BYU system, in the Mark Pope system. You see this with guys like Jackson Robinson, for example, where their one job is to score. Their one job is to go out there and get buckets, whilst the other players surrounding them make the offense go. And I think you're going to see something like that this upcoming season when Kentucky gets either Chas Lanier or Jackson Robinson. Knock on wood, they get at least one of them. I believe they will. You can look at my most recent episode, and I talk about that and why I believe that's the case. If you get somebody like Johnson on your roster next season, the expectation and goal would then be to surround him with talent either in the backcourt alongside him or at the wing position. Surround him with talent that can get him the ball in a number of ways. Or, even if they're not getting him the ball, be somebody that is capable of running those different things, grabbing rebounds, dishing the ball out, doing things down low, playing solid defense. I'm not sitting here telling you, well, it's okay that Johnson's just essentially a one-dimensional player. He's very, very, very good at scoring. And sure, he's going to have an opportunity to develop other aspects of his game, but I don't necessarily think it's needed from a five-star prospect like this, because you've seen Pope operate with kids like him in the past. And I expect if Kentucky lands Lanier or Robinson, you're going to see something similar this year. You're going to see a player like Johnson, who is a lengthier combo guard, who is down low at that power forward spot, that could really play up to small forward because he handles the ball so well, like Jackson Robinson, who is out there to get buckets. Now, is Robinson nearly as efficient as Lanier? No, and we could talk about that another day, but that's what he does. That's what they do. A guy like Johnson, I don't necessarily think you're giving up anything, even if he's not able to go out and grab rebounds, if he's not the best passer on the team when it comes to at least distributing the ball, period. He may be really good at passing, but at least he may not do it a ton. There are other players that Kentucky can get to surround him that make the team go. A great example of this being the case is, I think, what Kentucky has done with their roster this season. They've gotten a few different players across the board that can do a little bit of everything. You get a guy like Johnson in here, he's going to stand out. And I don't necessarily think that's a bad thing, if that makes sense. According to KSR, Johnson is being also heavily recruited still by Coach Cal, who was recruiting him during his time at Kentucky, now at Arkansas. Said the relationship with Cal hasn't really changed much now that he's with the Hogs. Johnson said, quote, "It's crazy, me being from Lexington, only knowing Coach Cal as being the head coach and now seeing him at a different school. It doesn't really seem real, but it is what it is. I know he still got the same plan for me as he did at UK as Arkansas, just building that relationship still." I think that Johnson speaks for a lot of Kentucky fans whenever he says it doesn't really seem real at this point, but it is what it is. He was asked about Coach Cal actually taking the job with the Razorbacks. He said, "I definitely didn't think it was real. I was in my room at Link Academy, and I got the ESPN notification. I was like, dang, that's crazy, but they had called my parents that night when it happened, so they've been staying in contact with me." A hot commodity Jasper Johnson is, according to KSR. Louisville, North Carolina, Alabama, Baylor, Kentucky have just started recruiting him pretty hard. Auburn has been on me, Ohio State as well. Johnson said Ohio State is also a recent addition. He's considering taking visits to Baylor, Southern California, and Louisville. In fact, Louisville's Pat Kelsey has already had a multi-hour-long meeting with Johnson's parents not too long ago. North Carolina is the top threat, according to KSR, for Jasper Johnson, a pure scoring threat that I think would honestly, he'd fit. I think that Kentucky could surround some talent. If he literally doesn't change anything about his game, Kentucky could surround him with talent that would just allow him to shine creatively on offense, which he can do. He can create. The fact that we've talked before on the show about players that can hit tough shots and the question of whether or not that can translate to the collegiate game. With guys like AJ, I think it's pretty clear, yeah, the kid's going to score in the college game. How does his three-point shot work out? I'm curious. I think he'll still be a above average three-point shooter. I don't think it'll be anything crazy, but I think it'll be above average whenever he gets to college, regardless of whether he comes to Kentucky or not. Guys like Johnson as well, you look at and you say, okay, well, if you're hitting those at this level, I understand that college is more physical. I understand it's more demanding, and I understand it's faster. But you can just tell the difference whenever their types of games stand out among the rest. You start to realize it doesn't really matter where they go. They're going to end up having success before they get to the NBA. I think that both of these prospects would just do well. I think they do well for Kentucky individually. But now we start to have the conversation, and this is something that's going to happen as long as Mark Pope's here, because like Johnson even said, Pope's not going to recruit as many freshmen. The dive into the transfer portal is going to happen pretty consistently, and that's how the roster's probably going to be made up year in and year out. Now, hopefully there's some continuity with maybe some sophomores and some juniors that can be here 2-3 years. But guys like Johnson are not going to come along extremely often to be somebody that kind of leads the team in scoring, that kind of has that statistical, I guess, advantage over some of these different players as a freshman. That's a conversation we're going to have is, what does it look like whenever different players like this enter the roster? I think it'll be interesting. And will they bring success to Kentucky? That's something Mark Pope's going to have to prove. Can you do it with the transfers? Everybody else is doing it. Can you do it specifically? Can you do it with a blend of freshmen, transfers, experience, youth, talent, shooting, defense? How is Mark Pope going to be able to structure his roster at the end of the day? I think guys like Johnson, you can't fill your roster with them, obviously. Last year's backcourt proved that. Kentucky had 3 different players that were just insane talents on offense. None of them could play defense. Just call it like it is. You can't do that you can't fill your roster with Jasper Johnsons, but if you have one and you surround him with a ton of like experienced older talent that do a bunch of different things well, he's going to shine. He's going to look really, really good. So AJ, Jasper, two players that Kentucky has rekindled in some cases, interest with. Let me know what you think about both of them in the comments below. All right, that's going to do it for today's episode of Locked On Kentucky. You can follow the show on Twitter at Locked On UK. You can follow me on Twitter at @LanceDawe_, and you can follow the show over on Instagram. That is at Kentucky Podcast. Any questions, comments, concerns, leave those in the YouTube comments below. Hit me on the socials. I will see you all tomorrow for another episode of Locked On Kentucky. Hope you guys have a great rest of your day, and God bless.